Hi, everyone. I just want to welcome you to what's going to be a great interview, a great conversation. I'd like to introduce you to Patti Pilkington Reed. I met Patti only a month ago in St. Louis. We both are authors, and we're going to be talking about her book, Face to Face: Smart Conversations with Yourself, Your Teenager, and Your Young Adult. So Patti and I met in St. Louis. We both are writers, and I was immediately drawn to her book, to the title of her book, which is Face to Face: Smart Conversations with Yourself, Your Teenagers, and Your Young Adult. And I have young adults, she has young adults. And so it was something that we both homeschooled, and we both love prayer, and we both understand this process of really having to grow with our kids and acknowledge that process. And so I knew immediately that I wanted to connect with Patti and do an interview with her. And Patti, before I get into the questions, please share whatever it is about yourself that you would like to share.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Tina. Well, first of all, again, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to share about the book. So let's see. I live in Dallas, Fort Worth. My husband and I have been here for 30 years, and we actually celebrate 30 years of marriage on October 5th. So God has been good to us. Yeah. And we have two children. Ryan is 27 and in real estate, and my daughter Hope is 22 and pursuing an acting career in New York City. So that's interesting. Yeah, I am a businesswoman. I've always loved business. I've owned two businesses in the past, but my heart is really for mamas. Like you mentioned, I homeschooled my children when they were younger because I wanted to impact them spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, and I wanted more time with them. So that's what I chose. But yeah, this whole writing journey is absolutely new for me. It was not on my agenda, but it was on God's. So here I am.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. I'm glad you wrote this book, and you all can go down and look below the bio. Patti's done a lot. She's a very successful businesswoman and leader, and definitely she's got a lot behind her plate, and still probably on her plate, in addition to being a writer. So let's dive in. And the first question that I want to ask you is, explain how you have learned how certain conversations actually cause our brain to respond in trust or distrust. And let me say, when I read that, I loved it because I've done some reading in neurobiology and neuroscience and how that works. So please share what you've learned.
Yeah. So I guess it was probably 4 years now. I have a coach. I've had a coach for 4 years. I highly recommend coaches because I would not be where I am today without her. And so she had just gotten certified in something called Conversational Intelligence. And that really piqued my interest when she mentioned that. And I was like, well, what is that? Tell me about that, because I want to have intelligent conversations. And because of business and, personally and professionally, I mean, who doesn't want to improve on how they communicate? And conversations is something that we have all the time. So I decided to enroll in the course. And then I decided to get certified in it. And so conversational intelligence, Tina, is a body of work that helps us understand what conversations open up the brain for trust and what conversations close them down. And so when you know how the brain works, then you have the opportunity to choose to have a greater impact or influence on the conversations that you do have. So when I wrote the book, obviously, that's what, is all underlying in those questions that I asked and the new possibilities. I really want to help parents move from where they are to where God wants them to be.
Excellent. That's so helpful because, why as a parent do we want to waste our time or have a conversation that's not really going to bear fruit?
Right.
It's better really to learn how to be heard, how our people need to hear us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So important. And so there's things obviously that, you can stay aware of or even become aware of in conversation that will help the transition, because we must transition. There's so many stages, right? There's infant and toddlers and tweens and teenagers and now young adults, right? And my heart's desire is, I'm going to stay in relationship with my children no matter what. And, having some tools to be able to do that and do that well is so important.
Yeah. So you mentioned just the stages, the, different ages and when it comes to trust. So if we think about it, our children as infants and toddlers, hopefully there's a natural ability for them to trust us as their caregivers.
Yes.
I find it interesting that something changes over time, whether we have to earn our trust or maintain that level of trust. I'm not sure how you would word it, but going into my next question, as kids become teens and then adults, how do we know when it's time to shift into a new stage and a new type of conversation?
I think you feel it. I think you feel the push, right? And, God made us that way, Tina, that, we are raising them up to be independent, dependent on God, but independent, individuals. And so, when you start to feel that kind of pulling away and, their friends take center stage and their word is gold as opposed to, mom and dad's word, which, that's not easy. But I think when you start to sense that, then you start to let out the rope. You start to test and, let them make decisions. And, I know that the brain learns best through failure. And so we are going to have to let them fail in some situations, which we don't want them to, but it is necessary in their growth process. Because as well as I do that we do learn from our mistakes or things we go, oh, don't want to do that again.
Absolutely. And just as you're talking, the word resilience comes to my mind. But usually I think about it with kids, raising kids who are resilient. But really what you're saying, we have to be resilient as well.
Yes.
We have to be able to, raise them and allow them, give them that space that, yes, you're going to make a mistake and I'm still here.
Yes. And I'm just going to say that if we don't give them that space, there's going to be consequences for that, because they feel it. They will feel the control. They will feel the push. And that does not bear fruit that you want in your life.
Yeah, that's great. On page 3, you write, telling our kids there needs to be a time and a shift of telling our kids what to do, to loosening the reins and giving up some control to allow space for decision-making practices. So can you give an example of, I know sometimes in my house, I talk about executive functioning, we're developing your skills, and sometimes, I'll tease and maybe I shouldn't, but in terms of my sons that this decision-making part of their brain, actually they're gonna have to wait a few years. So, listen, but I would just love to hear you respond to how to nurture and give them space to what types of decisions did you let your kids make? Obviously something like deciding maybe when to do their homework. That's one I've done, what they're going to take for lunch, but there are much more critical decisions that you referenced in your book.
There are, but I do think it's good that you begin with those. And I love what you shared with me earlier about your own child. And see, that was a shift, Tina, right? You change the way you ask the question. And, I often talk about it's time to stop telling, selling, and yelling. And it's time to allow them to make a decision. And I guess what comes to mind is, obviously when they're younger, particularly when they're still in the nest and, they're in high school. And, I remember, when my son, I really didn't, what am I going to say? As far as homework and all that stuff, I really let that go. Of course, I checked on his grades and, had a relationship with his teacher and things like that. But I felt like that, it was his responsibility. And if things didn't work out well, then there were consequences for that. I also remember my daughter, her first year away in New York. She went to an acting conservatory, and she had committed that summer to be a counselor at a Christian camp here in Texas. And we actually knew people there, and they were some of our friends. And so anyway, so she was going to get to do this for 7 weeks. Well, as it got closer, she felt like she couldn't do it. And I think I write about it in the book. That was so hard for us, because we knew that we knew our friends would be disappointed, because my daughter's awesome and she would be a great counselor. But she just got anxious about it, and, some other things. And so we said that, we think it's a very good decision for you to be, to fulfill your obligation and your commitment that you made, but we're going to let you decide.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
And she decided not to go.
Wow.
And that was hard. It was really hard, but you have to do it.
Yeah, you have to do it. And then they learn how to be trustworthy. They learn how to lean in and pray. They learn how to really own their faith and their life and their journey. And yeah, I agree with
right.
That's really helpful. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming that you didn't know all of these things maybe when they were 8, 9, and 10. It sounds like something that you come into in terms of conversational intelligence. So you talk about your journey. You talk about it in chapter 5, your personal journey, your spiritual and emotional growth that God guided you into. And one of the things that a parent does have to realize is we are becoming. There's no final destination, I don't think, on this side of heaven that we'll get to, but a growth mindset. And I love how you define that. And I want to just read that.
Yeah.
Adopting a viewpoint toward learning and resilience as we move through all the seasons of life. I love how you define growth mindset, because it is so important. So my question is, for people like me, who I call myself a recovering perfectionist, or people who are very goal-oriented or Enneagram X, Y, or Z, how would you advise them? How would you coach them with their frustration that they're going to feel in that journey of becoming, when they want a goal and they want to get there? And what would you say to them?
Well, I said it earlier, get a coach. I mean, honestly, my coach has been able to, I have allowed her, and she's asked for permission to poke and prod at me. And of course, I always say yes. But I think that, again, and particularly in the season of, they 16, 17, 18, and they're, leaving the house, we do have, I would believe that we have dreams and hopes and passions for our future. And whether that be to become more creative, to build a business, to spend more time with your husband, or, whatever that looks like. I do think it's important that, obviously, we're bringing it all to the Lord, right? We're bringing it all to the Lord. This is in my heart, God. Should I pursue this? Is this something that you want me to do? I mean, everything in this book is always run it through the filter of God, because, he knows what's best for us, and he sees ahead. And even, with my own journey, I remember specifically, I went back and I found my journal where I wrote something like, Lord, what do you want from me today? And there was a few things on there, and it said, start writing. And I thought, is that from you? I mean, just because it seems so random. And so, I just think that we need to be open. We need to stay open. We need to, join a new group, right? Meet new people, go to a networking event, or join an art class. But, we want to keep living, and we want to keep growing in the Lord. We want to grow intellectually, spiritually. We want to grow in our emotions. I bet if you asked your spouse, how do you think that I could, grow as a person in this season in life? I'm sure that he might have an answer for you.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that, because, sometimes when we do become a mom, unfortunately, some of us can fall into that identity. That's my whole identity. And I don't believe that that's actually even exemplified in Proverbs 31.
Mm-hmm.
A woman as a mom in that role, but I believe that she's equipped and empowered by God in lots of things.
Yes.
And you spoke to that as far as the dreams and then different things getting involved in, and living, and that's helpful because for people who are goal oriented, want to see fruit, they have to realize in parenting, the fruit you may not see it for a long time,
Yeah.
but there might be things that you do, a craft or a goal that you do see, get that immediate gratification that.
Yes. Yes. And if I could just speak to that about, the fruit, right? Because you and I both know that we see glimmers probably, at times through various things. And I write about that, kind of looking for those things and calling those things out. But it takes time, right? I mean, my son has absolutely come back to me, and he was typical firstborn, and he's definitely come back to us a couple of times. He said, "Yeah, you were right about that. You were right about that," and so that's very gratifying.
That's very encouraging to, I know, a lot of the listeners.
Yes.
Let me ask you, on chapter 7, you give us great tennis court analogy and talk about boundaries, which is something that, when they're teenagers, and even you mentioned, even when they come back home after college or during college, having to maneuver as a family those boundaries. Can you speak to that and even share that analogy?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. We were going through a difficult situation with one of my children. And so we went to counseling because we totally believe in counseling. We've done it over the years, whether it be for marriage or for our kids, whatever. I mean, we need that perspective, right? That's someone who's not emotionally involved in the situation. And I just remember our counselor, sharing with us the analogy of the tennis court. And basically what he said, Tina, was, your home is like a tennis court, okay? And there's boundaries around the outside. And then there is a net between you and Frank, because there are boundaries between husbands and wives. And your children are outside the court, outside the boundary lines, particularly, again, the older teens and the young adults. And if there's things happening, in their life and they're living there that are not your values, not your beliefs, not your convictions, what are you doing about that? And so obviously our children know all of those things, about us, because we kind of feed it into them. But what I loved about it was, in this situation, we were able to say to our child that, okay, so, here's the options, right? Our beliefs, our convictions. So here are the options, and then you can choose. So it's not like, we're the bad guys, right? We're giving them the option. This is our home. And now you get to choose if you would like to live, according to these guidelines, or if you would like to live somewhere else. And so really you have to be free, because I want to serve my children well. And we don't serve them well when we don't model or teach them what it means to lead, what it means to have boundaries, and what it means to live a life that honors God.
I love that. I totally agree with you. And it's a teaching integrity, for you and your husband, that you have integrity, and this is the way, you're going to keep your tennis court or your house.
That's right.
And giving them the choice. That's great. That's perfect.
Yeah. Good.
Let's see. Chapter 9. Oh, I think this was actually my favorite point when you talked about preparing for conversations.
Yes.
As as I mentioned to you, I have 4 adults, but I still have 2 who are coming behind. And I find that this is something that I didn't do well necessarily. So God's given me a take 2. Preparing these conversations. So if you could share to future readers of your book, the heart of that chapter and some specific tips in terms of what we need to do as a parent to prepare for those difficult conversations.
Yes. And, I'm working, Tina, on really developing that chapter into something more, just because I do think it can be so beneficial and helpful to stay connected to them. And so, so basically, there's an acronym that I learned, and I actually kind of changed around to work for the people that I want to talk to, and it's called PALS. And so, and the P really stands for prep or pre-conversation, right? So you need to have an important conversation with your adult children, with your spouse, honestly, with anybody. This book kind of transcends, even though it's, you know, for parents of teenagers and young adults. I've had people tell me, oh my gosh, I use this with my husband. So the P is really for prep or pre-conversation. And so there are things that you can do prior to going into that conversation where obviously you're going to pray. I also recommend that you sit and think about, if it is your child, you know, what are the things that I love about my child? You know, what is it that, you know, brings me joy about them? And when you do that, there's actually a chemical reaction in your body. Okay. And if I could so much to say, because hopefully, I mean, I don't really care who listens, but so I nurse my babies. Okay. And, you know, we would have to store some milk at times. Right. And so when we did that, I remember someone telling me, when you do that, when you pump, look at a picture of your child. And it completely changed it. And so it's kind of the same thing. So there was a chemical release in our body that did that. And so it's the same thing when we go into those conversations. If you can think on what is pure and lovely and good about the child, that will help you set yourself in a good space to go into the conversation, you know, equipped, so to speak. And then the other thing is also, where are you having the conversation? Okay. Is there a favorite coffee shop? Is there a favorite restaurant? Is there a favorite park? Let's talk about the environment, right? So, you know, again, you want to set the stage as best as you know how, so that it can be a productive conversation with the best outcome. So that can be really important, you know, something that you can do also. And so the other thing, there's actually several things. I won't get into them all, but you know, choosing your words, Tina. Okay. I mean, you know as well as I do that there's certain words that we use over and over and over again, and they no longer hear us. So how do we need to change our words? Because words create worlds, right? And I have this very open, candid, and honest relationship with my daughter. And, you know, she's really helped me to be, you know, all that God sees me to be. And she'll be like, you know, that's not really how you should say it, Mom, you know, because I'm a Jersey girl, Tina. I have Jersey in my blood. Even though I've been in Texas for, you know, 30 years, he's been shaving things off of my life. But really choosing the words that we use, because there's an exercise that I actually do in my workshops, and it's called Words Create Worlds. And I will hold up different pictures, and I give them sticky notes, and they write down, you know, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? And lo and behold, Tina, everybody's word is different. So what one word means to you, it's completely different to me, because we filter our experience through our history, through how we were parented, through so many situations. So it's so important to choose words, and even to ask them, you know, they may use a particular word that you might go, well, what does that mean to you? Tell me more about that. So understanding can happen. So those are just a couple of things for kind of prep.
Love it. Love it. I love it. I'm going to put some of those things to use. Your workshops sound great. I hope that God breathes on them, and that more and more people, I know many moms that would love to participate in something like that. And I would myself. So those are really great tips. I think, you know, and I don't want to discount dads, but as a mom, I know sometimes, you know, we're looking for tips, and then we have to apply what kind of works with us. But there are some things that are very principled and almost universal. You know, as you said, prayer, you know, obviously, and just preparing our heart. And when you talked about nursing, I remember that, you know, picture. But to do that before a conversation, I mean, we might even need to do that in marriage sometime.
Totally. Yes.
Have that picture. That's so helpful. I think more and more people are learning about the brain, about the
Yes.
nervous system, about just how God created us, spirit, soul, and body, and how they work together. And so what you've said makes a lot of sense. Like I said, that was my favorite, my take personally as a mom. A couple more things. One of the things I liked going to chapter 10, and I'm just going to read my note. The honesty and freedom to ask hard questions of themselves is a topic that appears in this chapter. What do you tell parents that deal with fear and the temptation to control what decisions their teens and young adults may make? I know you did talk about that a little bit. And you say, why it's important for them to feel the weight and responsibility and privilege of choosing. Since we've talked about it, maybe if you want to mention, is there a time looking back that you would have considered would be too early? I know you said, your gut will tell you when they're ready, for a different stage, but, I'm thinking of moms of, 6 and 7-year-olds who may take this to a place that just really isn't best.
Yeah. And I do stress that it is for the older teen and the young adult. Not that you can't derive things from it and use it, because you can use it in any relationship. But the bottom line is that when they're 6, 7, 8, 9, guess what? We're in charge. Okay, we're still in charge, and you need to go to your room, or you need to go do your homework, or you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's really not until they get older. And again, you will know by really, their responsibility level, how well they handle the responsibility that they're given. And I remember reading one of Henry Cloud's books, and he shares a story in there about, it was a while ago, but basically, he told his kids that, of course, because they want freedom. I mean, it's natural, right, for them to want freedom and to go out, but you're going to get that freedom based on, how you handle the responsibilities that are given to you. And, Tina, you have 6 children that they are all different.
Yes.
Right. And so the 10-year-old, or say you have a 10-year-old, might be more responsible than the 14-year-old. Right. And so that can cause, it's not age, right? It is maturity, and it is how they handle what they are given. And I mean, I think it's important to even say to them, okay, so I'm going to give you this responsibility. Now, I just want you to know in advance that this does not mean that this is going to happen all the time, but we're going to test this.
Yeah.
And if you pass, then we will go on. If you don't, then it's not time yet. Yeah. Right? Because I remember learning that once you give them something, it is way hard to take it back. Or once you've trained them in something, it's hard to retrain. So letting them know in advance, okay, this is a trial, and we're going to see how this goes. And because, again, that puts the responsibility on them, and that's important.
That's great. Excellent. Excellent. I love this. I love what you said. It's not age, but maturity.
Yes.
We have a running joke, when our kids are about to turn 18 and they think they're going to be.
Oh, God. Yes.
Adults.
They're adults now. Yes.
What does 18 really mean? And so, we do have a conversation about really what being an adult is to in our opinion. Anyway, let me. Yes. Let's see. Is there your last chapter, I think you talk about shame. And this is something that in the sessions that I do with mom groups, I always talk about shame. And so can you give us some testimonies of, conversations that you've had with your children, or some other tips beyond the preparation that we can take away to help us? We don't want our child to leave a conversation feeling any degree of shame, and we don't want to do that either for ourselves. And so do you have 1 or 2 things that you might say to that?
Yeah. Shame is a powerful thing. And I do think that it can hurt and hold people back. And I think that we are the adults, again, I'm talking about the older teens and the young adults. We are the adults in their life, Tina. And we have to, or get to model that to them. And so therefore, again, what are you saying to them? What are you telling them? What are you mad about? I will never forget, I just thought of this, that I can't remember particularly, what it was, but it was a situation with my daughter. And she was honest with me about, some things that had happened. And one of the things she said to me, and I think I might have even said it in the book, was, Mom, you don't have to tell me, you're upset or I already know, okay? I already know what I did wasn't right. And when you freak out on me, guess what you're doing? You're reinforcing what the enemy is already telling me. And I thought, I can't partner with the enemy. Oh my gosh. I mean, it really kind of shook me up. And so that is something to consider, is when we do not respond, and it is responding, not reacting to some of the things that our children have the courage and bravery to tell us, we need to be mature and listen and be open. And you can go cry in your closet later, but this is so important to their, identity and their, self-esteem and all of that. And then I just remember one other situation where my daughter was not feeling great about some things, about some choices she had made. And I was able to share my own brokenness as a teenager with her. And I feel like my vulnerability at the right time, I do want to say it has to be at the right time. You ask the Holy Spirit, because I want her to know, or him to know, that we all are broken. We all need Jesus. We all make bad decisions. Yeah. And there is a road back.
Yeah.
So important.
Thanks for saying that. All that you said, yeah, sometimes we learn lessons the hard way, and we're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that, and I shouldn't have said it that way. And we can always go back and apologize. But,
yes.
I just really like how you said that, and the reality of, when they do approach us.
Oh, gosh, make the space.
Yeah.
Make the space for them.
Yeah, that graciousness that we need to have is so, so important. And then when you ended with just those timing of certain conversations, and that when they're adults, there's actually, there's some things that we can share that they will actually take better, and it will actually bear more fruit than, when they were younger. And yeah, don't you find just that connection with them now as adults, 22 and 27, I understand, but it's just, there's just such a wonderful quality that God has, that we're not out of their life.
Right.
But there's a different type of movement that we have in their life. Yeah.
Absolutely. And really, it's freedom, Tina. Yeah. We have to be free enough to let them be free, and trust that the Lord is going to lead them and guide them in their own stories. And we are stewards of their lives. And there comes a time where, the training kind of is over. And now, hopefully, because we've built that trust in the relationship, they are able to, my daughter, she lives in New York. She calls me every single day. I talk to her every single day, and I know that that's not really the norm. I feel so grateful, but I have worked on it, known when, didn't always get it right. She lets me know, but really just value that incredibly.
Well, thanks for that. And before we end, I just want to ask, is there one chapter that is your favorite But this has been it's a fantastic book. I think everyone
Thank you.
It's a very easy read. And I love how you have just the short snippet of chapters. It's very helpful, based on topic. Very, very helpful for, mom life.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you have a favorite chapter?
So I was thinking about that, and I actually have two. And so the first one would be silver linings. And actually, I was just coaching someone last night, one of my clients, and we were talking about her daughter. And what happens is, Tina, is they go out and maybe they make some decisions that we don't agree with, or they're like, oh my gosh, what are they doing? Right? We have expectations, right? We raise them a certain way, and then they might not be walking on that path, and it's just scary. And so I share a story in there about my daughter who was dating someone that I wasn't necessarily thinking it was a great idea, but whatever, she'll figure it out. And she did. But one of the things that I talk about in Silver Linings is once, that communication was open, here she is, asking me for advice and telling me about, particular situations that, may have occurred. And so what I got to do, because I have built this trust and I have this communication, so what I did was I looked for character traits in her that, again, I don't really like that she's dating this guy, but I'm looking for the decision she's making. I'm looking for character quality. Wow, you told them that? I am so proud of you that you did that. That is really good. And, oh, you chose your friends over him? Good job, right? So we must, and I was telling my client this last night, that even though there's a lot of things that aren't good, I want you to pay attention to things that, even if it's something tiny, that you can commend her for, that you can speak into her life, because this will help build her identity of who she is. So I think that is so important that we look for silver linings in the conversations. And then the last thing would be their voice. And I specifically put that as the last chapter, because it is our job as their parents to develop their voice. And by God's grace, both my children have a voice, but I've also given them space to develop that. And I'm just going to tell you, I haven't always liked it, or the things that their new idea about something or their new thought about whatever, but they're processing. They're figuring it out. If we are not safe for them to process all that is coming at them, would you rather them process with you or with their other 22-year-old? So this is so important. Just let them flesh it out. I mean, I had a conversation with my daughter last week about 3 really hot topics. I'm thinking, oh dear God, like all at once. And really, honestly, I just slowed it down and I just said, those are really good questions. And I think that you should talk to so-and-so because they're really more of an expert in that area. And I would ask your brother about that because I know he knows about that. But I don't know enough about that to really make a comment about that. So slowing it down and not freaking out and letting them flesh it out is so important.
That's great. Thank you for writing this book.
You're welcome.
And thank you for sharing. So good. Everything that you said is so good. And I know everybody who watches this is going to be so blessed.
Thank you.
A lot of full content that you just shared over the time we've been together. And so again, everyone, this is Patti Pilkington Reed. You see her book there. You can find out more about her in the notes below. And I just really recommend, I read it on a nice Sunday afternoon on my porch, and it was just very refreshing. And so moms and dads, there's a lot to be gained. Again, thank you for writing the book. And thanks for coming on. It was just great to have you.
Oh, it was wonderful. And I have a new friend now.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yes, thanks, Tina.